Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's ready to start day two. I think we have a great panel here to discuss overcoming barriers to engagement with urban audiences. And we'll be hearing from our panelists about connecting with diverse urban audiences and the constraints that prevent or limit participation. Additionally, there'll be some talk about institutional barriers within an agency that may inhibit one's ability to accomplish the mission. And the panel will be highlighting research related to this topic, as well as some lessons learned from direct experience in innovative urban outreach programs. And joining us on the panel today from left to right are Dr. Rudy Schuster, who is the chief of the U.S. Geological Survey Policy Analysis and Science Assistance Branch, Dr. Myron Floyd from North Carolina State University, Nita Marchant, Nambi Mangoon and Jennifer Johnson and Nambi Mangoon. That's backwards, sorry. And they together make up the Wild Indigo Nature Explorations Outreach Team. So first we'll just hear from each of the panelists about their work, after which we'll have a discussion with all the panelists and take questions from the audience at that point. And I think that the panelists will generate a lot of discussion points. So enjoy, and we'll.
Slide up on the screen now?
Yes. How do I?
Okay. Why is the,
The projector's not on it. There we go. No, now we can see camera.
oh, wow, how about that? So where's the screen that shows us back to the,
Now, yep, it's up there.
oh, it is.
Oh.
The
Very
question is,
good.
how do I advance the slides?
You have a little controller right
Yeah.
there.
Little controller
Just do
right
like
there.
this is next
Okay.
and back.
Perfect, thank you. Hello, my name is Rudy Schuster. I'm, as you heard, with the Policy Analysis Science Assistance Branch of the USGS located in Fort Collins. And can everybody hear me? Is this, no? Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you. With the USGS, and one of the great things about my job is that we're here to help you, right? As part of the Department of Interior, our job is to help provide, with the USGS, part of the Interior, our job is to help answer your science questions, provide data that you need to make management decisions. And so as a resource for you, that's why we're here, as a resource for you, to be able to help you. So work with Natalie, work with Danielle, work with whoever else to help find ways to maybe engage us to be able to answer your questions and provide the information that you need. And I'd like to start off quickly by saying that I'm honored to be here in this room with all of you, and I'm just amazed at the level of passion and the level of enthusiasm that you folks bring to this effort of managing wildlife, to conserving, preserving, managing natural resources. I'm just constantly in awe at just how great of a job and how inspiring all of you folks are. So thank you for having me here and allowing me to be part of this at all. I better push my start button on my stopwatch because I'm already off schedule. We're going to talk about constraints to connecting children with nature. And the idea here is that part of the Fish and Wildlife Service, one of your mission areas or topical areas is to connect people with nature. This is a sub-part of that, connecting children directly with nature. I guess I should back up for a second and say that a lot of this research was done specifically by someone named Joan Ratz, who's not here right now, and was actually funded through Janet Addy, who's here at the National Conservation Training Center. So I need to thank her for her support and vision for thinking that this would be something important to learn about. The overall question that we were asking is, what factors are impeding greater success in the efforts of Fish and Wildlife Service to actually accomplish the mission or accomplish the goal of connecting children with nature? So this is essentially what's called like an institutional analysis, where we're looking within the agency. Some of the work that Brad was talking about yesterday, where we're going out to the refuges and talking to the community members about things that they would like to do or barriers for them. This is looking within the agency and talking to people who actually work for the Fish and Wildlife Service. What we did was a survey of Fish and Wildlife Service employees who indicated that they were engaged in education and outreach efforts. It's an online survey, so we sent out emails to people. Maybe some of you folks received those emails. We used an adaptive survey format, meaning that if you answered certain questions affirmatively, you were brought to a next set of questions. If you answered negatively, you might not have seen questions. So people were directed to various answers. That's the great thing about online surveying. You don't have to see every single question out there. We had a very reasonable sample size out there and a very reasonable response rate, which for those that can see the screen, about 55% response rate, and about 320 people actually filled out the survey. We stratify, I keep wandering away from the microphone, sorry. We stratified by regions so that we had a proportional sample as close as possible to the folks who were in those regions, and we screened questions and made sure that people who were responding actually did do education and outreach as part of their job. We also conducted a literature review similar to the one and probably contained many of the same articles that you heard about yesterday to help inform the survey and developing the research questions. We also spoke to Fish and Wildlife Service employees when designing the survey questions to make sure that it all made sense. So, I'm going to give a couple of highlights from some of the questions that were out there. The first question that we're talking about is the relevance of connecting children with nature to the Fish and Wildlife Service mission. So basically trying to get an understanding of how Fish and Wildlife Service employees, you all, interpreted this mission and why you thought that it was important for the Fish and Wildlife Service to go do this. We came up with 9 statements from the literature and from talking to people. These statements were measured on a 5-point scale from not relevant at all, moderately relevant to completely relevant. And essentially we're asking people, why should you be concerned about accomplishing this mission or doing this job? So what I'm going to quickly do is just go over what those 9 statements were. Young people, Fish and Wildlife Service wants young people to be interested in conservation and wildlife management careers, wants people to participate in outdoor recreation activities, wants people to have an appreciation for the public lands, people to be concerned about the preservation of public lands, people to participate in environmental education programming, people to politically support not just Fish and Wildlife Service, but public land management decisions in general. People to be knowledgeable about the environment, and in this case, very specifically, there were people brought up knowledge about specific issues, reaping the health benefits, and for the service to provide support to school curriculums. Now notice I didn't put any numbers. Remember, this is a 5-point scale. Can you guess what the results were when you asked people these questions? The averages were all 4s and 5s. Everybody thought that these are relevant and important factors and reasons why this mission is important. So across the board, there was a great deal of support for all of these reasons for participating or accomplishing the mission of connecting kids in nature. I had to sneak a slide of my kids in there, a picture of my kids in there while we're on vacation. I won't stay there too long because I could stare and smile at that all day long. So another set of questions that we asked were people's perceptions about their success with accomplishing this mission. And we asked it from a few different directions, two directions, 4 questions. One was an individual's perceived success in the past and an individual's perceived success in the future, and the individual's perception of the agency's success in the past and the agency's ability to succeed in the future. Again, on a 5-point scale, this time 1 to 6. And what we see here is that, in general, people feel that they have been successful and that they will be successful, and that the agency has been successful and will continue to be successful. So folks feel that it's important to do this for a whole lot of reasons, and folks feel that they are reasonably successful and that the agency's been reasonably successful. It's interesting to note up there that individuals, on average, their personal feeling of success is a little bit greater than their perceived success with the overall agency. So everybody's doing a little bit better than everybody else from their own perspective. I wasn't sure how this slide was going to translate and if you folks were going to be able to read that. Can you guys read that text out there? Can you see all the bars and arrows? Yeah, sorry about that. So what we did is, I actually put a second slide in just in case this happened to compensate for this. what we did is we asked people a list of 10 different constraints. The list of constraints came from the literature and talking to people out there that could impede their performance in accomplishing the mission. So then this question here basically asked frequency, just people to say what is the one biggest problem that you think that you're encountering while you're out there. And I'll go to the next slide because it's probably easier to read. And these are now ordered. A little easier to read. After I saw those demographics, I knew I can put in really small font and a lot of it in there, and you'd probably be able to read it. Now, these are just frequencies, people checking one, and we went in there. Staffing, the biggest issue. There just aren't enough people out there to be able to get the job done. That's what you folks are saying. Funding wasn't second. That was surprising, or not. The other thing is practical issues was the biggest thing. And practical issues include distance to the refuge, just being able to get there, those sort of things. It's just the practical issues that are preventing somebody getting from point A to point B to be able to do it. Competition from technology and technology-based activities. The kids are just interested in something else, right? Even if you get them out there, you're talking to them and bringing them out there, and they're paying attention to their application or to their device or whatever it might be out there. Competition, where funding issues then comes up fourth. State educational standards and lack of environmental education curriculum. So the idea, if you look through the goals that you have for your urban initiatives, connecting with schools, and people have been talking about connecting in schools, you folks are saying, yeah, we really want to do that. However, it's not part of the school's curriculum in many cases, and we don't have a clear connection. It's just not as easy or not as relevant to them. Parents' attitudes, these are non-fear related. The parents are just not necessarily interested in it. It's not something they've done or wanted to do or want to do, so it's not interesting to them. Children's schedules, they're just overscheduled. Children's general lack of interest, and I've timed out on the screen. I don't know if it matters up here. It's okay with me. It's okay with me if I can't see it. Lack of information about the most effective techniques was on the low end of the list, right? So you guys we're getting to the lower end of frequency. That was not as much of a problem. You folks are saying that, yeah, we know how to do it. We have a reasonable idea how to do it. And parents' fears. And parents' fears is different. That's actually fears of strangers or other things in the field. So again, this is like the top 10 list for Dave Letterman or somebody. So then, frequency, after frequency, we ask people how much of a problem is each constraint in actually doing your job. How much of a problem does constraint X create in your efforts to connect children with nature? 5-point scale, again, 0 being no problem whatsoever. 5 being, 4, it stops me from doing my job completely. It shuts me down. We used an analysis of variance, a repeated measures analysis of variance, to figure out, are there significant differences between these various constraints, and if so, which ones are different than the other ones. So again, it's probably not so easy to read this slide, but the important thing to take away, this was measured again on a 5-point scale, 0 to 4. The constraints that are, and I'm going to give another slide that's going to be a lot easier to read to actually talk about the results. But the important thing to remember or to get out of this one is that the constraints that are in the same box are not different from each other. The boxes are significantly different from each other. So we ended up with 3 tiers of constraints here. Some that were more of a problem down to some that were small problem. The other good thing to take away from this is that they're not incredibly strong. They're not incredibly severe. None of them are up there on the big problem stops my job side of things. They're a problem or a small problem. So our 3 tiers. So the ones that were a problem or the biggest problems, practical issues, technology, funding, staffing. We already went over what each of those means. But in terms of getting out there, getting in the field, engaging people, we've been hearing this across the board. It's difficult to get them to the refuge. If we can just get them to the refuge, we'd be able to actually engage them. And the second one is a practical issue of technology. If we can get them there, then we have to compete for their interest in many cases. And like you saw a picture of my kids, I have 2 5-year-olds. I know it, and I coach soccer. I know what it's like to have 10 5-year-old girls on this field at one time and keep their interest. Geese fly by, they're running down the field, and they stop. And they watch the geese. The ball's over there. Tier 2, the schedules, the attitudes, lack of comfort and educational standards, and then going down to the smallest problems, parents' fears, and techniques. Really close here. Oh, I missed a slide. Oh, here we go. Stability, controllability, and causality. So just asking if there were constraints wasn't enough. We wanted to know something about those constraints and the ability to influence those constraints. So we asked about three things. Are they stable, right? Do they stay the same or do they change? In this particular case, something that's instability is good in this case, right? Because if something is not stable, then it can change. Is it controllable? Is it something that the individual, the Fish and Wildlife Service manager, the educational outreach education person can control? And finally, locus of causality is the responsibility or the cause of this situation within the individual or within the agency, or is it external to them? So what we found is that the good thing, constraints are perceived as unstable, meaning that they can change, right? They're also controllable. It's something that the managers think that, okay, I can do something to influence this constraint and solve this problem. And the third thing is that these constraints are perceived as, well, it's not really your fault, right? It's not, that's a pretty frank way to say it, but really the causality of these constraints is not within the refuge or within the agency. These things are happening someplace else. So you can actually, be able to change them, you can control them, and you're not necessarily responsible for the cause. And with that, I'm pretty much right on time, I think. Again, these are just key findings. Folks believe that as individuals and as an agency, you've been successful. You guys believe that connecting children with nature is important and is relevant to the Fish and Wildlife Service mission. Constraints exist. They're of low to moderate severity. We have 3 tiers of constraints of things that are constraining folks from doing their job, and that they can be changed, and that they can be changed over time. Stop there, and then switch.
Thank you, Rudy. I hope that it's interesting for everyone here to see what Fish and Wildlife Service employees are thinking, kind of compare that to your own experiences, and keep any questions you have in mind from Rudy's presentation for our discussion at the end. We're now going to hear from Dr. Floyd. Yesterday, he presented about what's been learned from the literature related to connecting diverse and urban audiences and wildlife-dependent recreation. And today, we'll hear more about a few of the research projects he's involved in that explore evaluation of a program to engage urban youth, MPS staff perceptions of engaging with diverse audiences, and the impacts of partnerships.
Good morning. In my talk, I'm going to just cover 3 different studies, and it comes from a different agency, as she mentioned, as Danielle mentioned. I'm going to talk about research that I've worked on with graduate students that focus on National Park Service urban national parks. I think there are 3 important lessons that we can learn from the work that we've been doing there, and I'll say right off the top, and I'll say it at the end, that this is work that I've worked on with graduate students, so much of what I'm showing and much of what I'm talking about is basically their work with my guidance. So I'm going to try to parrot what they've said to the best of my ability. But I do think there are some important lessons that we can take here that will apply to some of the same situations that you're working in and some of the same situations that you are striving to change. So first off, I just want to tell you a little bit about a program at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park that in the beginning, a program that was designed to promote health and well-being with local school groups. And it was a part of an initiative to see the parks as a health resource. And so the idea that the Park Service had was to go into local schools, teach kids about healthy eating, physical activity, and all the great things that go along with that. So the initial design for that program came from the National Park Service Visitor Services staff. And in one local middle school, the Rittinger Middle School in Akron, Ohio, they presented that to the kids, and basically the kids gave it a thumbs down. And basically, the kids thought the program was boring, and they had better ideas. And so what that staff did was to completely turn over they turned over the program planning and the program design to the local students and the kids. And they renamed it, and it became Get Up, Get Out, and Go. And that was one of the things that we think that made that program successful. And to the point where it wasn't just the Park Service that was designing that program, even all the promotional materials. It was the kids who came up with the logo and the tagline, the logo. They came up with these flyers, even though the Park Service provided all the content in there. But it was the kids who came up with the games that they wanted to participate in, the things that they thought were fun to do in the parks. The logo found itself on these flyers, and it also found itself on the bus boards that went around town. So again, they were able to see their efforts displayed in the community, and just kind of to see what they were contributing to this program. So the Get Up and Go program, Get Up, Get Out and Go program, was basically in its initial year a series of events at different stations within the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. And it involved things like fishing, teaching kids how to fish. It involved just on-site teaching kids how to put up a tent, and camping, not necessarily camping overnight at first, but at the last week of this program, they did allow kids and their parents the opportunity to stay overnight in a tent and camp. But it was a summer-long program which the park picked up and continued to work with over the last several years. But all the transportation to the events were free and provided by the National Park Service and their partners, and all the equipment was provided, and so there was no cost at this point to the children and their families. But the main point here is that the kids were integrally involved in the planning and design of these programs. So we had the opportunity to go in before the program and survey the kids on a number of things, including how aware they were of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, basically being in their backyard. We wanted to know things like, well, had they ever visited the park? And we were also interested in, would they have any interest in ever visiting a national park? So we did that before and after, and we saw encouraging results. For example, and these have been published, we saw, for example, that at baseline, 31% of the kids had not heard of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and a variety of different sites at that park, but at post-test, that doubled. In terms of reported visits, we see threefold increase in terms of the number of youth, a percentage of youth who actually had visited a Cuyahoga Valley National Park site. And then when we asked, do you ever intend to visit a national park in the future, we also see encouraging results. And granted, there are a whole list of other factors that come into play here in terms of what might have caused those increases. But we do think these initial results are encouraging and really tell us a lot about the importance of involving kids in the planning of these programs. A second study I want to bring to your attention is one that we just completed, focused on the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and also the Chattahoochee River National Recreation Area by one of my graduate students, Dave Santucci, who is now at Boston Harbor Island National Park. And it's based on his master's thesis. And Dave had a chance to go back to Cuyahoga and interview the visitor services staff, and he also interviewed visitor services staff at Chattahoochee to ask them about what they thought was effective in terms of connecting with diverse audiences. And I just want to highlight one of the themes that came out in his qualitative interviews. And one of the main concerns, was the fact that kids were coming to the programs. This was on the part of the visitor services staff. They felt that kids were coming to the programs, but it was just a one-time experience. But what they really wanted was long-term engagement with those kids, because they felt like they were only getting a one-time park experience, but they were not becoming what we might think of as long-time park stewards. And so he came up with this label of catch and release, the fact that you were catching the kids, but then we would never see them again after the initial programs. And part of that was due to lack of stable funding to provide transportation to the programs over time. But also, in a different aspect of that, they were successful at getting local community youth in as temporary hires, I guess through the various programs. I can't remember all the acronyms, STEP, SKIP, and things like that. But they were not able to offer them permanent employment beyond that. And I just have a quote that kind of summarizes that, or summarizes these points. You know, I mean, we're getting that first time initial visit with so many, but it's then whether they are coming back, and I don't know, and I just sometimes don't know, and that's to express that first point. But to the point about diverse students and staff, you get them, diverse students, in all this temporary student hiring program, you suck them up, you have all these people you've trained and trained and trained, and you cannot offer them anything. In other words, you've invested all this time and energy in training them to be visitor services staff or whatever other jobs they served in, but then you have to let them go and you cannot rehire them for various, organizational reasons. A third study relates to an ongoing dissertation project focused around the Congaree National Park in South Carolina. The unique thing about the Congaree National Park is that it's a national park that's located just outside of Columbia, South Carolina, and all the surrounding communities there are predominantly African American. As you can see there, the 3 towns I have listed, like Hopkins is 64% African American, Gadsden is 92%, and Eastover is 62%. But yet, when we look at the visitor services data from on-site visitation, as we saw yesterday, it mirrors that exactly, perfectly. 96% of the visitation is white. So, why is that? So one of the things that's been happening at this particular site is that the Park Service and a local community organization have been partnering for a number of years to put on a festival. And I just want to highlight this one aspect of this project because it demonstrates something that I think is fairly enlightening or educational in the sense that we may not get the results that we would like to see. So this program that they have, or this festival, is something called Congaree Swamp Fest. And this is just a front page of their website. So this festival, Swamp Fest, is in connection with the Congaree National Park, which preserves and protects old growth, bottomland hardwood, and it has significant wilderness within it. But yet we are partnering with an organization that's putting on a gospel fest, rhythm and blues, jazz concerts. And so it's, maybe it's an interesting pairing there. And you see that the Park Services, their sign is on that website. And do I have a laser? Yes, I do. And you see here, their free shuttle buses will carry visitors from the festival site to the national park. So there's clearly a connection between this jazz, gospel, blues festival to a park protected area which has significant wilderness. But this is just one example, one way that they have been partnering with this local community. And one thing I just wanted to highlight, so a lot of the programming for this festival is not on the park. Some of it's on the park, but some of the concert pieces are off-site. And in one particular site is a church that's in that local community. So what are we learning there? This one particular theme I wanted to highlight. In that community, they see that national park in a few ways. One is they see that national park as a form of economic development. They see it as a way for them to promote the well-being of folks in that community, for small businesses, to kind of cater to tourists that come by, which is a legitimate thing to consider. The church is definitely an optimal point of engagement for partnerships there. I think we might have heard that over the last day and a half, I think. But the one thing I just wanted to highlight here is that that partnership did not necessarily translate into increased visitor diversity. So I think this is like the 13th year of this festival. I think if I go back to that slide about the website. But yet, when you go on site, a lot of the programs that are going on for that big weekend, a lot of it's happening off-site, and very few African Americans are participating on the on-site things that the Park Service is putting on. So the key point there is that sometimes those partnerships may not lead to the things that the agency thinks should be happening, for example, increased diversity. But those are just 3 things I just wanted I wanted to highlight in terms of takeaways from these 3 projects. In that, firstly, if we're going to connect with diverse audiences, it is important to plan with them rather than plan for them. I think we tried to make that point yesterday in terms of how we structure partnerships that should be done on an equal footing. And in the case with the kids, it was very important that we work with them. Sometimes we underestimate their ability, we underestimate their capacity, but in this case, it showed the Park Service that they could turn over control and give them responsibility to plan and design these programs. Secondly, if we want to build long-term connections, we have to think about ways to overcome those organizational barriers, whether it's funding, whether it's the traditional ways that we provide programming, whether or not we feel comfortable going off-site. Those things must be considered if you want to have long-term connections with communities. And lastly, as I just said, partnerships may not lead to the goals that we have in mind. So it's important to lay out and clearly identify, what are the goals of this partnership? Is it diverse partners or is it diverse visitors? And those are 2 different things. So if you want diverse visitation, that's something else that has to be done to accomplish that. But if we have a diverse set of partners, is that the goal? So it's important that we clarify, what the end goal should be in these efforts. And as I started with, I'd just like to thank the folks that really were out there doing the interviews and collecting the data, trying to help us make sense of it. Dave Santucci, as I mentioned, and Tamia Thompson, who is working at the Congaree doing her dissertation work at the Congaree National Park in South Carolina. I thank all of you for listening and look forward to your questions following our next presentation.
Thank you, Myron. I saw a lot of head nodding during Myron's talking about catch and release and the input of activities not necessarily leading to what we expect for the end goals. So I think we'll have a lot of connections there. Now we'll be hearing from the Wild Indigo Nature Explorations Outreach Team. Nita will be telling us more about Wild Indigo and their approach to outreach, and then we'll hear the personal stories of Nita, Nabi, and Jennifer. So welcome them.
Good morning. Okay, hopefully I can work this machine. Okay, I'd like you guys to do an exercise with me. I'd like you to close your eyes for a minute. Take a moment to inhale, relax, breathe clean air, stroll through the wonders of a beautiful symphony produced by nature. Oak savannas, wetlands, and prairies, and the birds and animals that live there. Imagine yourself entering an oasis not far from your home. Imagine escaping from the stress of city life. Can you see it? Breathe. This is the message that we deliver to urban communities on the south side of Chicago. We start with possibility thinking. We encourage them to take a mental vacation first and imagine a stress-free environment. We teach why it's important to help steward, conserve, and restore these natural resources. They are free and they belong to you. Who is Wild Indigo? Wild Indigo is a community of fellows and local naturalists. Our mission is to heighten awareness of the rich natural resources that are available in the Southside Forest Preserves of Cook County. Our founding partners, Forest Preserves of Cook County, Audubon Chicago Region, and Eden Place Nature Center. These are our parents. How we're funded? Through 2012 and 2013 funding from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. So they birthed Wild Indigo, and what you see here are the outreach fellows. Now I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. Nita Marchant, an outreach fellow with Audubon. Before Wild Indigo, I was stressed. I was robotized. by climbing the corporate ladder. I was after that big dollar, and it really completely stressed me out. I was in business administration, and I decided to change careers into social services. I learned about, I became a certified alcohol and drug abuse counselor, and I began to do what I called them was encouraging the community of formerly drug abusers, formerly homeless people. I began working with them, trying to motivate them to think outside of the box and think better of themselves and think more possibilities. And I really became engaged with that, and I was enjoying it. And then I got laid off on my new career. And so I heard about an opportunity that was being offered by Chicago Region Audubon. And so I went in for an interview, and they explained to me what it was, and I said, wow, this sounds like heaven. It sounds like more of a vacation than a real job. So because it gave me an opportunity to go back to my childhood and my childhood love for nature and animals. So I began learning from engaging with the naturalists and members of the Southside community, because our charge was to go out into the community and encourage them to participate in nature conservation work. So this is what I discovered. This is the biggest thing. I discovered that Wild Indigo's nature conservation work is a tool for healing and restoring a sense of community, a sense of well-being, a sense of self-worth in populations that have been ravaged by a broken economy and misdirected by an outdated social ecosystem that promotes segregation. Nature is a multiple of colors. Nature is like, it's more of I call it a salad bowl. Imagine a salad bowl. And so that was my approach to this outreach. It's not about black and white. It's not about this and that. It's about enjoying what's natural. Here's my final thoughts. I discovered through my research, I discovered an article in from the Center for Humans and Nature, and they asked this question: how is nature critical to a 21st century urban ethic? Well, the biggest thing is that it's about expanding it's no longer about expanding human empires. That's finished. That's not what this world is about today. You can see that. It's about now expanding human compassion. It's about discovering that the whole community of life depends on each other's uniqueness and what we're going to do about it. So it's about building relationships, because we're dealing with people that are broken, that some of them are broken, and this is diverse, it's people of color. They've been broken by an economic system and they don't trust. So we're saying that it's about building relationships. And it's about helping them to get over their fears about what we go out and tell them that, for instance, okay, come on out to the forest. We're going to teach you how to how to take care of nature, but you can have fun at the same time. And so one of the questions they say is, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen after the funding is gone? What's going to happen after you're gone? I'm out here enjoying nature now, learning how to conserve the nature. Is it going to be here after you guys are gone? They're afraid of that, that we're setting them up for failure. They're afraid that, well, what type of people are you really looking for? You say people of color, because initially I said I was being very diplomatic. I didn't know it was about reaching out to African Americans and other and Hispanics. I thought I was trying to be diplomatic, and then my supervisor, Miss Julie Pollock, said it's about we're reaching out to the African American community. So I said, oh, okay. So, so it was okay for me to say that, you know. So what kind of African Americans? Are we talking about the people that are really in the heart of the community, or a special kind of African Americans? Because, you know, you got some very, what do they call, bourgeois blacks, you know, and you got down-to-earth blacks. You know, what kind of black people are you looking for? You know what I mean? And then I was told, I said, well, we're trying to get different populations, veterans. Well, what type of veterans? Because veterans have been traumatized, a lot of them. So what type of veterans? We're looking for people that can come out and engage with the community. Well, what kind of people? People that can afford their own transportation to get there? Well, what about the people that would love to get out there but don't have the transportation? So our goal is, again, is to create a nature conservation platforms for diverse populations and help them to mingle with each other. Because we've learned some things. We merged them all together. One was about over 200 people, veterans, people from the recovery community, people, straight bourgeois black people. They were all together in one community, and we were leading them through the forest and everything. And then all of a sudden there was an outbreak with the veterans. So a veteran kind of had a reaction. But the group the veterans group was able to contain that individual. But then the people that were observing, they got a little afraid. So we're learning as we're going, and we discovered that that we may need to have special population group projects where the groups actually take charge of what type of activities are going on. So with that, this is Wild Indigo. I went from a business executive trying to climb the corporate ladder to blue jeans and boots. So that's my story.
Hi, and I do have to say, she was wearing suits, but now she comes out in army fatigue, boots, a scarf on. So hi, I'm Nambi. Most of you see this as Nambi, but actually I'm the sunshine of the operation. I keep the team happy every day, and the families that I engage with, I want them to know it's all about being happy every day. I was introduced to Wild Indigo through Mr. Michael Howard, Eden's Place. My background consists of healthcare. Nothing in the conservation world. Sorry. Okay. So with my outreach, I am very fearless with it. I will go into any neighborhood, any alley, anywhere to get individuals engaged with nature. This picture is with the mayor of Dalton, Illinois. I did some tree planting. So I wanted to get the mayor of Dalton involved in Wild Indigo, so what better way to go and plant some trees with him and plants. So actually, this is not knowing anything about the conservation world. This is my first introduction. Thank you. I came into some deers. We were at Kickapoo Woods, and as I arrived, I had to meet my fellow Wild Indigos there, and when I looked up, there were 8 deers. So I had 2 options. Get some more insurance, run, or learn about nature. So the point is, in order for me to engage different families, I had to get over my fears of not knowing about the conservation world. So I ended up going down the trail, and of course Judy turned around and said, "Come on, Bambi, you'll be fine." So this particular slide is when we were at Bartell Grassland. There's a group that follows us. They're called the Little Kids Big Dream Smiles Club, Kids Club. And when they were coming out with us, they were just so excited. When they got there, they had the boots lined up, their binoculars, and they were like, wow, just to go on a wetland that was led by Mr. Michael Howard and Dick Reiner in Chicago. And so this is one of the reactions of one of the little girls that was at the Bartell Grassland in her boots. And she was just splashing water, and they were just excited about knowing about field mice and garden snakes and different birds, listening to tadpoles. This is another picture of them. So the point is, these families, they are broken, as Nita Marchand mentioned. They are like, what is this? What's going on? But once they're introduced to Wild Indigo and the nature, they are like, wow, this is amazing. One of the leaders of the kids club said that this is just so exciting to see. She never seen the smiles on their faces. She said she'd rather listen to them smiling and being happy than to listen to bullets in their neighborhood. So what they do is every time they know that we're going on an outing, they're the first to call and say, don't forget us. We're going on the outings with you guys. So as me going through this conservation world. It's been exciting for me. I was trying to read off these cards, but I'm just going to go from the heart. I can't do it. It's been very exciting to see the families to come out and enjoy nature with us. These families, it's just amazing just to see the joy on the kids' faces and the families when they walk away. It's like they never knew about brush cutting, a red-winged blackbird. They never knew. And just to see that and them to come back is just amazing and outstanding. So I just wanted to say thank you, and it is a blessing, and I hope that we continue to see more of them.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jennifer Johnson, and I too am an Outreach Fellow. My background is I'm an artist, and I was a gardener. For a time, I wasn't in school and I was unemployed, but I decided, well, I don't have much to do. I'm going to start a garden. But through that garden and pulling weeds and tilling soil, I found purpose. And when the opportunity to came up to work with Wild Indigo, I felt like, well, this is for me. I had been birding with Judy Pollock from Chicago Region Audubon for about a year before I was hired. And she told me about the opportunity, and I applied. And so now I do most of Wild Indigo's graphic design and web needs. So what we worked on for those first few months with Judy and I before Nita and Nambi came along was that we wanted to work on the messaging. And they mentioned before that a lot of people were afraid of nature and the preserves. And what we wanted to get across was that there's nothing to fear, and that they're safe where they were, and that the woods were friendly. And from our teamwork and from that messaging, we've had nearly 200 at our largest event, as Nita mentioned. And we've had approximately 100 people on average to come up to our events. And on average, we have 56 return from Little Smiles Big Dreams Kids Club and from the RTW Vets. But it's not just about the numbers. The success of our efforts the success that has come from our efforts have included return pride to the community and kids that feel carefree and can have fun again. And one thing that we've realized that the community has recognized the value of the preserves and what they bring to their everyday lives. And recently, we've been recognized by Toni Preckwinkle, who's the Cook County president, and she's also the president of the Cook County Forest Preserves. And I'm glad to see that people like her understand nature's value, that it's a remedy to their constituents. And so Wild Indigo's not just a program, it's not just a fad, it's a true remedy to the problems in African American communities and other communities of color. So thank you so much.
Great.
This is a way to contact us, and we appreciate your attention.
Well, I just want to thank the Wild Indigo folks for sharing with us. I really love the connection to wellness of individuals and of the community, and the way that it's changed your life so much being involved in that program. So now I think we have some time to open it up to the audience and take some questions. Hopefully, yeah, we're going to have a good discussion for a little bit. We got a little behind schedule, but well, I have a question to start off. Just thinking about the interconnectedness of your presentations. I was wondering from the Wild Indigo team, thinking about the catch and release theme that Myron had in his talk. Is that something that you face a lot, where you have people coming to a program once, but you might never see them again. And how do you try to cope with that?
I don't know if this is on. Well, again, one of the biggest fears was that we were setting these communities of color up for failure. They were afraid that they couldn't get back return. So we've got an RTW Veteran Center that's involved. Those are homeless veterans. We've got a children's group, and we have a recovery group. And so yes, that was a big concern. How do we get back out there? So what we're encouraging groups to do is to incorporate the nature conservation work into their structure, where they can apply for funding, because we're talking about recovery, not only recovering self, but we're talking about recovering from the economic crises, from the things that are going on in the nature, in the forest preserve, trying to preserve. It's about a community of recovery. So yes, that was a concern, and the way that we're approaching it is to have the groups adopt the concept and incorporate nature conservation work into their activities.
Any questions out there? Oh. There's a couple down in front here.
This question comes from our online community, from the Long Island Refuge Complex. It's for the Wild Indigo team. They're asking, how much funding do you receive from the Fish and Wildlife Service, and what does it go towards? As well as, how do you handle transportation to field sites?
Well, the funding question is a question from Ms. Judy Pollock, and primarily from Ms. Judy Pollock, and she's in the audience somewhere. But we provide free bus transportation, so that's one of the carrots. That's one of Mr. Michael Howard's words. Well, we need a carrot. So one of the carrots is a free bus transportation, and they gravitated towards that. And that is funded through the Cook County Forest Preserves, as well as the funding that came for this project through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Other questions?
Danielle, you're going to call out.
Hi, I'm Kate Toniolo. I'm from Northeast Regional Office, and I had a couple of questions. One was for Rudy, and that is, with the study that you did, has there been any study of how the perceptions of Fish and Wildlife staff relate to actual barriers? Are they the same? Are they different? Or has that not been studied?
To the actual barriers that...
We have perceived barriers to participation, and are those accurate? Are our perceptions accurate, or are they, would the community have different perceived barriers?
I think that's a great question, asking what next. That's the what next question, and I'm glad that you asked that, because what's next is actually happening in one case with the work that Brad Milley was talking about, and that's being worked on with Danielle and the Urban Refuge, and with Myron, conducting these case studies. We're going out and talking to the communities and asking them what their barriers are and what they are perceiving as the constraints to participation. That's one direction to take, is going out to the community. And I think the next direction also, so that's where it's actually happening. That's where we're actually going out and making a connection there. The other direction that could be used is to go out and talk to the refuges themselves, to the people who are in the refuges, which is what Danielle is doing now also, and figuring out, well, what do they perceive as the constraints and the barriers to actually accomplishing this mission, and combining that information with hopefully a third, and that's what are the success stories, if possible. And you're hearing success stories all over the place here, but it would be great to be able to compile these stories and put them in a place where everybody can access them and learn from each other's resources.
Thank you. And I just had one more question, if that's okay. Sorry if I'm blocking anybody else from talking. And this is for the ladies of Wild Indigo. And thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. This was all incredibly informative. And I think, Nita, you mentioned one of the big issues is how do you make this sustainable? And, what happens when you leave? And I think that's a big issue that we're going to be dealing with any of the urban initiatives that we're putting together. And, it's got to be a sell to the community to be able to say, we're not going to abandon you in 3 years' time. So how are you guys doing that with your project?
Well, one thing that we've been doing is, again, we've been making sure that the groups, I think the big thing is the preserves. We wanted to make sure that they know they can do it themselves as well. They don't have to wait for us to come out and get them. One thing about the Cook County Forest Preserves is that they're everywhere. They're all across the county. And quite a few of them are, you can access them through public transportation. And CTA, as much as we complain about it back home, it's still very useful and helpful. So that's one thing we try to emphasize with Wild Indigo. Another way is that we've been reaching out to other groups that do this kind of work too, so we're not the only groups for introducing people to nature. Brookfield Zoo does it, Eden Place does it, Chicago Region Audubon does it as well.
Great. Anything from up in the back, maybe? We have one way up in the back.
For the Wild Indigo ladies, I was curious, did you find that even though you may have continued to assist urban folk with transportation, that they were making a transition to kind of wanting to be out there on their own and take their own hikes with their own families and do that kind of thing? Or did they continue to be more comfortable with a structured activity, with a leader, with a guide, that kind of thing? Thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question because we are transitioning from picnics and fun to now taking more responsibility for the activities, because there's only 3 of us along with a few of the naturalists. So the big trip we had, where there was about 200 people, we discovered that each group can take responsibility for creating activities for their particular group, and they can choose to join us on the nature walks and brush cutting and the different activities that we create. So now it's more of a joint effort. And in terms of getting out to the preserves, yes, there are some bus transportations for people that live, for instance, in the Calumet region. But we are outreaching from the inner city, from 35th and Cottage Grove and King Drive, all the way out to the hundreds. So for the people that are trying to get out to the hundreds, these are groups like the RTW group. Now they get some funding, not much, but they get some funding. So if they now petition for funding to assist in getting out to the preserves, and for what reason? We're talking about healing, recovery from shock and from all kinds of urban issues that they can prove now that through nature conservation work, it's healing, it's soothing, and it's teaching them self-worth and self-responsibility again. So that's how we're approaching it.
Great. I think we have one more question up and back, and then
Last question. Yep.
Yeah, hi, it's not a question, but I'm Judy Pollock, also with Wild Indigo, and I just wanted to answer the funding question that came in earlier. So over the past 2 years, we're about finishing our first year. So over those 2 years, we've gotten from 3 different funding sources in Fish and Wildlife, we've gotten $115,000. And that goes to the salaries of the outreach fellows. They're all part-time. We wish that they were all full-time. The 2 partner organizations, one is Audubon Chicago Region, the other is Eden Place Nature Center. And then a lot of that funding goes to transportation, it goes to marketing, it goes to outreach. It also goes to pay stipends, because a big part of our program is engaging other African American naturalists out in the community to lead our activities, and we pay them stipends. And also, like a certain amount, just I think we kind of spread around to community organizations because we're holding events in local community organizations who are all pretty strapped for funds, and they appreciate us being able to pay them a little bit of rental on a room that we use and that kind of thing. So we could use a lot more, but we feel like we've done a good job with what we've got. And as everybody has sort of made clear, we're just trying to figure out the way to keep the program going once, because funding tends to come when something's new and then go away. So that's a puzzle that we're all working on. We also have great support from our partners at the Forest Preserve District, who sometimes provide naturalists for our programs and sometimes provide transportation for our programs. So they've been an enormous support for us.
Great, thank you, Judy. I saw a lot of hands still in the air, so I really encourage everyone to seek these folks out and badger them with questions throughout the rest of the time. And I just want to thank everyone on the panel again and you all. Great.